Is everybody able to see the slide that says biodegradable mulching films?
Yep.
Just fine.
All right, let's get it started. Ivan, I think you can take care of the waiting room there. Good afternoon, everybody. I am Carlos Diaz. I'm the principal investigator for the project entitled Degradable Mulching Films for Sustainable Agriculture. This is a collaboration with Cornell Cooperative Extension, Colisano Institute for Sustainability, and is funded by the Foundation for Food and Agricultural Research, and also funded by New York State. So let's get started. Biodegradable mulching films. So let's talk about mulching films and what that is. It's not something new. It's something that has been used for a while now in agriculture, and it is because of its many benefits, some of them outlined here. Basically, it works. It increases the yield. In here, we can see wheat around 7%, maize up to 47%. Another benefit is it uses less water, so it helps control and retain moisture. It reduces the use of pesticides and herbicides, so blocking the light and it prevents the germination of weeds, and therefore we need to use less chemicals, and it also avoids erosion. So a lot of benefits for these mulching films. And traditionally or conventionally, those are polyethylene-based films, and they have some interesting pros. It's relatively cheap to buy a roll. Here we see $100 a roll. Easy to lay with traditional equipment. And because these are made of traditional plastics, it doesn't matter if we store it for 5 years, 8 years, they're still gonna perform the same. Some of the cons have to do now with the plastic pollution. And they also need to be collected before the next planting. So this collection requires labor and also requires you to have a strategy to get rid of it. And that is not cheap. So you have to take into account landfill tipping fees, or maybe the occasional incineration, which is not environmentally friendly. So there is some labor cost and also some disposing issues. In response to that, the industry has come out with biodegradable mulch films. So those are commercially available. So some of the pros is that it biodegrades in the soil, saving the labor of collection. And it basically has the same agronomic performance, some of the benefits that we just saw. Some of the cons here are going to be the cost, around $250 a roll. But the problem really is this that we bolted here. The biodegradation can be too slow, and that is going to affect crop value due to plastic sticking to the roots and fruits, especially in the next season. Once we planted and there is pieces of plastic, we've heard from growers also that sometimes those feel when the wind blows, some of these little pieces start blowing with it, and that's not desirable, especially for the neighbors. And another problem here is that because this material is made of a biodegradable substrate, it's going to have a shelf life. So if we store it for 3-5 years, we might not get the same performance. But yeah, basically they biodegrade too slow. And in those issues is what we frame this project. So the objective of this project are to improve the situation of growers by developing technologies that accelerate the biodegradation of these agricultural mulchings without compromising their performance or, most importantly, the soil health. So that's what we want to do. We want to develop technology to accelerate the biodegradation. And we have a plan B here, and it's applying known environmentally friendly technologies to the disposal of conventional agricultural mulch films after removal, and we're talking specifically about pyrolysis. So we did a project understanding pyrolysis of organic waste commingle with these mulch films and see if it's a viable disposing alternative. And we don't want to stop there. We want to really work with growers to demonstrate the efficacy of the developed technologies and promote the adoption on the field. We met about 2 years ago. In year 2 of the project, we did a webinar and we informed you about what we did up to then. And now we're in year 4. And so let me just tell you a little bit about it. Before I go there, let's talk about the approaches and technologies for biodegradation. So we have 3 technologies that we are proposing to accelerate biodegradation. The first one has to do with microbial activation. So we know that there are microbes in the soil that are gonna metabolize and eat these biodegradable plastics. I'm talking about biodegradable polyesters, which are used currently. And these microbes do it, and they are provided by the soil. So the first approach is like, hey, why don't, instead of waiting for the soil or Mother Nature to provide those microbes, why don't we inoculate the film with microbes that we know are going to target the film, and in that way increase the biodegradation. So we did just that, and we were able to isolate microbes and develop a spray. We're going to learn more about that, and Harshal, one of the PhD students, is going to talk about some of the details. The second approach is more of a physical approach. We know that the biodegradation starts at the surface. The microbes need to adhere to the surface. So we borrow sort of a known technology from the packaging industry. And we said, what about we do a surface activation treatment using plasma? Why don't we pre-treat or pre-degrade just the very surface of the film without compromising the mechanical properties, and in that increase the wettability and the adhesion of microbes? So we're going to hear about that as well. The third approach, which we have to rethink a new film structure, it's about, what about instead of having these polyesters that degrade slowly, and we know it, why don't we minimize the use of the polyester by creating a sandwich structure? So we have 2 skins made of polyester and a core made of starch. And why starch? Because the starch is food for microbes mainly. So in doing that, we are addressing the biodegradability and also the cost, because we're not putting this expensive polyester in the whole structure. Now we're maybe using 10% of that in the skin layers. We have Ivan Hernandez here, who's going to talk about the journey of creating and manufacturing this multi-layer structure and testing them. And we're also going to hear about this. You see in the picture, it says biochar enriched soil. So how can we use biochar, a byproduct of the pyrolysis method, back into the mulch films, back into the soil? All right, let me now do a recap of what we heard 2 years ago. I'm not going to get into the details, but just a reminder. So in year 1 and 2, we benchmarked the performance of existing agriculture mulch films. So basically, we wanted to understand, what does it mean it degrades too slow? So we did experiments to figure out that, and Harshal is going to talk about it. And we did the lab scale proof of concept of these alternative approaches to accelerating biodegradation. And we call those the trigger mechanisms, the microbial activation and the surface activation. So we did that in the lab and did the proof of concept. At the same time, we started developing this new idea, this more of a, what we call a genuine breakthrough in the novel structure for biodegradable films, and have them meet both the functional performance and the accelerated degradation requirements. We did a lab scale demonstration of the environmentally friendly disposal technology, the thermochemical conversion using pyrolysis. So basically we commingle organic waste with conventional mulch film, and we demonstrated that this is a viable idea. A paper was published on this concept with a techno-economic analysis. And for those of you, I'm gonna ask Ivan to put the website in the chat. And if you visit the website, you can learn more about pyrolysis and the commingle with mulch films. So what did we find? The microbial activation. We identified optimal species, optimal microbes, and proved that the application increased the count. So it's easy to say the concept, but to go in the lab and actually demonstrate it is no easy task. And Harshal did some very interesting work on this. So we demonstrated that, and then we also demonstrate that the application accelerates the biodegradation, both the fragmentation, the physical degradation, and the conversion of the organic matter in the film to CO2. That's the respirometry. We did the plasma surface treatment. So we demonstrated that it increases the wettability and the microbial adhesion, and that the treatment or the surface activation is it stays. There is no recovery back to the original, but that we can have a long-term treatment. And when composted, the treated film show increased fragmentation. Now for the novel multi-layer film, PBAT, that's the most common use polyester for biodegradable films, and TPS, thermoplastic starch, we co-extruded it, and we demonstrated that this concept accelerates the biodegradation we did in a compost environment. Now let's get to from then to now. So what happened year 3 and half of year 4? And we shift the focus to the field validation. Now I want to give a shout out here to our partners, the Cornell Cooperative Extension, that they have been instrumental in connecting us with growers and making these experiments happen in the field. Some of them are here in this call. Year 3, we thought naively at the time that we were going to go in the field and run field trials right off the bat, and we learned that there is a lot of hurdles to overcome first and a lot of learnings to do. So year 3 was we call it here a year of discovery. The microbial activation, we were able to isolate microbes. We were able through fermentation to grow those batches and have this aqueous solution with microbes. But now we needed to develop application methods using the available equipment in the farm. We're talking about sprayers, drip irrigation systems, and that turned into a whole other project. In the plasma treatment, now we needed to treat full rolls of films and evaluate the orientation of the treated size. Do we put it facing up, touching down? So those were two things that we realized they're not easy. Novel multi-layer film. We are right now in the 3rd generation design for that novel multi-layer film. Ivan is going to talk to us about it, but we realize that it's not something that we do in the lab and put in the field and it's going to work. Actually, those two are kind of iterative, and the field has to inform the design process. So we really needed to incorporate the agronomic performance into the film design. And another thing we learned, that the initial results for biodegradation, they require sometimes, or at an average, 18 months in the field. Why 18 months? We need a 1 growing season, then we tilt it into the soil, and then we need a full year of biodegradation in the soil to start seeing some of these results. So what we thought it was straightforward, that we want to till plastics into the soil and then get results. Now we learned that we have to be patient. But at the same time, we started looking for alternative. How can we get results faster? So Harshal is going to talk about some experiments that we're doing using industrial compost and other more or faster as biodegradation environments. Accomplishment of year 3, the field validation of microbial activation. We scale up the production of a microbial solution, and we developed 2 application methods via spray and drip irrigation. We have some, we did a field trial with this, and we have right now film tilted into the soil, ready to be looked at. Similar, we were able to treat full-size rolls of plasma-treated film. We actually did that with a collaboration with Denmark and the Danish Institute of Technology and a company, the original equipment manufacturer of plasma equipment, Verafon, and they help us in treating full rolls of film that we then put in the field. And again, we're waiting those 18 months before we start getting some of the insights of what's happening with that treatment. Is it a practical discovery that can lead to again helping the growers, or is it more of an intellectual discovery? The field evaluation of the novel RIT film prototype, we manufactured or co-extruded this PBAT, thermoplastic starch PBAT film on a pilot scale line. We determined minimum opacity for weed suppression, and we developed a prototype using biochar as the opacifier. So talk about circular economy, we're using the byproduct of treating the waste back into the films. Year 4, we are halfway there. We call it here field validation. So this we were naive enough to try to run full-scale field trials, but still we learned that we need a lot of learning and tweaking and honing before we can really do that. So year 4 trials are paving the way for a full-scale trials in the future. In the microbial activation, we realized that we needed to conduct control environment studies about what the effect of either spraying the films or using the drip irrigation system. So at the moment, we're conducting raised bed experiments to determine the preferred method of applying the microbial activant. For the plasma treatment, we did a fully randomized design. In 2002, we did a full field trial. We were going to do it in 2 different years, so 2022 and this year, 2023. But we realized that the method that we're using to quantify biodegradation was very, very labor intensive. And we have here in the audience Suresh, who developed the method, and this quartering method. So it requires to get samples of soil that are like 4 feet by 4 feet by 1 feet. So you can imagine that, and then mixing and discarding quarters of those and mixing again and doing that. Harshal is going to talk about it. But long story short, we're not doing the second block, which will be a different year. Instead, we're going to keep collecting the data from the 2022 field trial and see what insights we get about the plasma treatment. In the novel multi-layer film, we scale up a 3rd-generation film design and deploy a full-scale randomized blocked design in the field. And Ivan is going to talk to us about it. Again, the initial biodegradable results from these experiments will not be available, and we're thinking going into year 5 of the project. So future plans to complete the initial assessment of the 2023 results. So this project will require a no-cost extension. So we're working with our funders to get approved for a no-cost extension, and also to conduct a techno-economic analysis and life cycle assessment for the novel multi-layer film. And we are also looking to enroll commercial partners to scale up some of the concepts for full trials and test the most promising concepts. And conducting these full-scale random block designs. So, all right, that's the introduction. I think that's the 10,000 level. I hope I didn't bore you to death. But now let's hear about some of the details. And for that, we have here with us Ivan Hernandez and Harshal Kansara, two PhDs that have been with us the whole journey of the project. So let me stop sharing and allow them to share. If you have questions, please save them for the end. And if you think you're not going to remember it, you can type it in the chat, and we're going to have a discussion session at the end. So, Ivan, the floor is yours.
All right. I think everybody can hear me. So thank you, Professor. Yes, this I'm going to talk a bit about the journey of designing a novel multi-layer agricultural mulch film as part of my PhD journey. So, as the professor was saying, the first thing we did last time we talked about this webinar like 2 years ago, we did the preliminary field trials to understand and have a benchmark, a baseline of what is out there. So the commercial agricultural mulch films, so you have the LDPE and the other biodegradable options we can find out there. And we thought, okay, what is the minimum to be used in the field? What is that fit for use metric that we need to manufacture to be able to compete with them? So we thought it was going to be tensile strength, but we looked at the tensile strength of LDPE, which in theory is the polymer that's made from petroleum, the indestructible, and actually it's not the highest one out there. What really matters when you're going to lay it out in the field, and that's what we saw, is not the tensile strength, but the tear resistance. So the tear resistance, and more specifically the cross-direction tear resistance, is the one that is going to indicate a little bit if your laying process is going to be smooth or is going to be a little bit more complicated. So our fit for use metric was decided to be a little bit more than 250 grams to be able to ensure that the laying of the plastic was going to be without problems. Of course, not forgetting, like, we need a minimum of tensile strength, but that wasn't the limiting factor that we saw in the commercial baseline out there. And how did we see this? Well, because we laid them, thanks to Chad and Cornell Cooperative Extension, we were able to lay those films in his field, and we saw not only the laying process, but also the evolution with the weathering and the rain and the sun and everything on those films. And we realized that after a while, actually, the mechanical properties are not that critical anymore. It's all about the opacity. So the beginning mechanical properties are super important because it needs to hold for the tractor to lay it. But after that, it's all about the opacity and how it's going to suppress the weeds to protect your crop, right? So the film will become stiffer and the tensile strength is going to go down. But at the end of the day, if you are going to tilt it with the soil, that is not that much of a problem. So now that we understand how that film has to perform, we could start working on the thermoplastic starch layer. And we did some preliminary samples. We did some very small batches, and we saw that we could try to maximize water content because, as the professor already mentioned, the more water, the more microbial activity, the better, right? So we wanted to have a thermoplastic starch that has a lot of water. And so we found out this mixture that we wanted, and then we said, okay, let's make a starch layer. And basically we started baking. We baked a lot of starch. You have to dry it, then you mix it, then you grind it, then you heat it again, then you repeat that process 3 times to get that powder that you have in your kitchen all the way to a paste that you can actually extrude. And oh, sorry, I'm in the lab, so there's some noise. And so that paste we were able to extrude from the twin screw extruder, from a single screw extruder, sorry. And then we were able to use it in a blown film and make multi-layered films. However, we got a 5-layer and not a 3-layer, which was what we wanted, but it was a breakthrough in the sense that we were able to do this multi-layer film. We were able to see for the first time that starch layer there in the middle. So from there, we were able also to get some samples to understand what is the effect of that thermoplastic starch on the PBAT degradation, and trying to evidence that it is actually going to degrade faster. So in a home compost environment, we analyzed how the loss of starch, the degradation of starch, was going to increase the PBAT degradation. And so here with some pictures, you can see that not only the weight of the starch film is gonna be lost faster, but also it's gonna fragment more. And that is very important for degradation because it gives higher surface area, so more space for the microbes to eat. However, because home compost is still not that much faster, um, we weren't in that year that we made that experiment, we weren't able to show statistically that the PBAT was degrading that much faster. We had the signs, everything was saying so, but statistically, because we're scientists, we cannot say that it was degrading faster. So we're repeating this experiment in the industrial compost that Harshit is going to talk a little bit about. And in there, we're having very promising results. And okay, so we were kind of seeing that it was degrading faster. So how could we scale it up? Make a field-worthy sample with that thermoplastic starch. And the problem is that I cannot bake during 40 hours straight. So I needed to find a way to actually manufacture in a more industrial setting that thermoplastic starch. Luckily, we acquired a twin screw extruder that allowed us to try different mixtures. And so I tried our mixture that had a lot of water, but sadly that didn't work. So I had to change a little bit the mixture, and I was able to finally use in our blown film line here to be able to extrude a multi-layer film that was opaque thanks to the starch. And I said, oh, that's great, because the starch is going to be able to provide that opacity, and I'm going to be able to lay it, and it was going to be great. And so in 2022, we tried it, and it laid pretty well. You can see there in the picture how that starch containing film was opaque enough, or it looked at least. And then we didn't thought about the rain and the irrigation and everything, because here in the lab we don't have rain or irrigation, and that rain and irrigation, well, it interacted with the starch like we thought it was going to be, but actually it dissolved it too. So our opaque film, thanks to the starch, became a transparent film. And what happened? Well, the weed suppression became non-existent, and all the weeds started to grow. So from there, we circled back and tried to, that same year, do another trial to really figure out that fit for use opacity and how much opacifier we needed. So that's where we started to use biochar, which is a sustainable biofiller in plastics that we've worked around. And actually, we published a couple of things about it, and trying to understand what are the things of biochar that are better for plastic filling, and especially plastic films in this case. And biochar can be processed from waste, and we were able actually to lay it in the film to have an opacity enough to suppress the weeds. So we knew the opacity, we knew that now how to manufacture it, we knew how to make the thermoplastic starch. Now we could actually make a film. So in the 2023 season, we said we're gonna make this film. So I made a lot of biochar containing PBAT to then layer and make three layers. One that was opaque, so it was gonna have a lot of biochar in to be able to hold the light. One that was the low moisture thermoplastic starch that was able to increase that biodegradability we've been talking about, and a strong layer, maybe one that doesn't have that much biochar, but it will hold and will make all that mechanical all the mechanical work for the laying that we identified during the first year. So we manufactured it here in our blown film line and looked opaque enough. Of course, it's not as dark as the commercial ones because they use carbon black, but we don't need it actually to be that black. We just need to be black enough to suppress the weed growth. And it was wide enough. So then we went to the field. Well, and yeah, of course, the cross section that are very nice because we can see that thick coarse starch layer in the middle and the sides that are the biodegradable plastics. So, however, because here in the lab, this is not an industrial manufacturing facility, I cannot have the homogeneity that I would like to have 200 or 400 feet of exactly the same thickness. So mine range between 150 and 50 micrometers, which was good enough for our field trans. And our tear resistance was where we wanted it to be, and our tensile strength also. So it was even able to delaminate, and we could even eat that starch layer because starch is dissolvable and we can actually eat it. So then we went ahead and tried it in the field. 2 different field trials with 2 different crops. One was onions, one was watermelons, in a full randomized block design. How did it lay? It laid pretty well. And as you can see there, the tractor is pushing. We are helping it roll, but when you produce it, normally it's going to be tightly rolled, so that won't need. And it's holding. It's doing its job. And you can see we were able to lay the actual field, the whole field. How is it going? Well, the onions, which is this trial here, we are monitoring the temperature of the under the film, and you can see here that it looks like we have 2 sections. One section that was from middle April to July, where the RIT appeared to be a little bit warmer than the rest. And then after July, when the weather got really hot and even the soil was getting hotter, everything evened out. We were able to explain that difference because I guess I wasn't exact enough, and my temperature sensor went 2 centimeters deeper than the other one. And when you do an inch deeper in soil, you have a 30% difference in temperature. So that's why that difference appears there in my data. But the end of the day, every film is warming up the soil enough, holding and helping the onion. So of course we have to look at the yield data. And when we looked at the yield data that we gathered from our harvest 2 weeks ago, our, I don't know, 135 onions, we didn't find any statistical difference between the 3 treatments. So LDPE, biochar, RIT, and biodegradable commercial film all performed statistically equally. And how about the other one? Because this is onions. But what about watermelons? So watermelons, everything was doing great. Everybody was behaving equally, as you can see here. But in July 17th, something happened to one of the sensors. Maybe a deer fell on it, or something started to munch, or I don't know. But the black, as you can see there, the black data started to go crazy. And that is the things that happen when you do research in the field. And is that nature is going to get in the middle of your data collection. But if we don't, so now we cannot trust that black line, but that is okay because that's the LDPE film and there's a lot of literature on it. But when we looked at the RIT film and the biodegradable one, they're very close to each other. So that means it's good. It looks like it's doing okay. It's doing its job. And we're just waiting until actually tomorrow we're gonna meet at the farm and pick up the rest of the harvest to be able to bring you the rest of the data. So finally, what can we say? We made a multi-layer agricultural mulch film that apparently until now it's performing equally as the others. Now we have to finish gathering our watermelon data, and you will see hopefully a publication on it very soon. And that would be all for my update. I think we're excited to hear about Harshus though.
All right. And let me give a shout out here that the problems with the thickness, because it's significantly thicker than something you will produce commercially, that's one of the problems of the economies of scale. So if we look into the future, if we go into the future, that shouldn't be a problem if we are able to use state-of-the-art equipment, or if this is a success, then the economies of scale will take care of the thickness issue. Thank you, Ivan. And let's hear from Harsha.
Okay, can I be heard?
Loud and clear.
Okay, and Professor, everyone can see the experiments. Sorry, the screen share. Is it good?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. So I'll be talking about a little bit about the microbial intervention and also about the industrial composting experiments which we did to accelerate the biodegradation of mulch films. In the first, oh, sorry, don't go. In the first section, I'll be covering the microbial intervention, which Dr. Carlos talked about a little bit. And in order to understand why we need the microbial intervention, let's understand why these films degrade slowly. So as Dr. Carlos mentioned, we go to the farm, and also Ivan mentioned, we go to the farm, we lay the plastic films down, and some of the commercial films need to be pulled at the end of the harvest season, but the biodegradable films can be incorporated directly into the soil. And by incorporation, it just means using a mechanical shredding process and shredding these films into uniform pieces and leaving them in the field to biodegrade. And this biodegradation process sometimes can take a long time. It can take 3 to 4 years, and maybe even longer, depending on where you are. Like states like New York, where the soil freezes over in the winter, you can have a really long time to biodegrade some of these films. And you, every year when farmers work on the field, they keep adding more plastic to the field, and this kind of builds up the plastic pieces in the field. In most cases, these are the biodegradable mulch films are not an issue, and they don't leave any residue behind. But large chunks of plastics can interact with roots and root systems and can cause decreasing yields. So this is the main reason where microbial intervention could help. As soon as the farmers finish their harvest, you could actually use a microbial spray and or a drip irrigation method to introduce the microbes into the system, and shred your plastic or incorporate the plastic into the field, and hopefully the microbial community should break the plastics down faster, these enhanced communities. And this is what we are working on right now. And we to isolate the microbes, we used a method called enrichment of cultures. I'll not go over the entire method. It goes something like this, but imagine it this way. We take these plastic pieces and we grind them into this very fine powder, and we use this powder as a carbon source for the microbes in the soil. And only those microbes which can break this type of carbon source down will grow on it, and we are able to isolate that over time in these kind of flasks. And the results which we got from these studies were, we were able to isolate two specific species of microbes. One was the Echromobacter species, and second was the Pseudomonas species. And we decided to select Pseudomonas species based on further testing of these microbes. And the next question we asked was, okay, now we have our isolated microbes. We were able to show that these grow on we are able to grow on the plastics, and they can break the plastics down when they specifically are given these plastics, or when we isolate them from these plastics. But what happens when you grow them up and then put them back in the soil? And I'll use a metaphor in this case. Imagine you go to a buffet, you have multiple choices to eat different things. So you tend to take a little bit of everything. And same thing with these microbes, where you introduce them back to the soil, and there are so many different soil organic components, and they can break different stuff down. So why would they choose to break the plastic down? So that's something which needs to be tested. And we decided to test that in the lab too. And the method we used to do this was using carbon dioxide evolution experiments and fragmentation experiments simultaneously together. And what carbon dioxide experiments are is these films, when they break down, the biodegradable mulch films, they break down into three components. Carbon dioxide is one, of water, and cell biomass, or microbial biomass, is the third one. And this gold standard to evaluate biodegradability of plastic films in literature is testing how much carbon dioxide comes out after these films start to break down over time. And we decided to do that in two ways. So we have our soil, and then we have our microbes which we have put in soil. So we have enhanced soil, and we have soils. We add plastics to both of these, and we measure the biodegradation using CO2 experiments, and we measure the actual fragmentation. The fragmentation experiments help here because the carbon dioxide experiments are a closed system, so you cannot visually see how the material is actually breaking down. You can kind of track the biodegradation, but you don't really have a feel for how the material breaks down. And that's something where the fragmentation experiments help. And these are just simple experiments which happen in jars, where we have our soil with and without the microbes, and our plastics kept in a sandwich. And as the material breaks down, we can see how the plastics break down over time. And this is to show you visually how the enhanced soil and the regular soil kind of breaks the Ecovio film down. So Ecovio is a common film which has PBAT, which Ivan mentioned, and PLA, which is another component, which is another polyester, which is contained in these films. And the enhanced soil shows slightly more signs of biodegradation. You can see slightly larger holes and slightly bigger cracks in the material, and this is promising. It can be even more can be seen even more so in the Bio 360 film, which has some amount of thermoplastic starch in it. The enhanced soil, which has microbes in it, has seems to show more promise here. And this is just these are just early results, and hopefully we'll have the final results of all of these studies and the actual CO2 biodegradation studies by December. But at least the initial results seem promising. I'll talk about a little bit about the field trials and the scale up process of the microbes, and what we did in the previous year, 2022, and how we scaled up and how we went to the field. So this was the typical design. I'll not go over the exact experimental details, but the actual picture of the trial setup can be seen here. And we decided to use drip irrigation as one method to introduce the microbes directly to the soil, and microbial spray directly on top of the plastic, and trying to assess which of these two methods are the best, and which one makes the most sense when you try to do this on a large scale. And the way we scale the microbes up is we take individual colonies from agar plates, and then we scale them up in these large fermenters, which are very controlled apparatus of very, very large test tubes, but highly controlled. You have air going in, you have stirrers and whatnot. So you can get very, very high cell biomass material coming out of these small fermenters. And those fermenters, these runs are finished, you take this material, this cell biomass which we have grown, and you introduce it either directly through drip irrigation using these kind of pumps, or using a hand sprayer to spray it on top of the plastic. So we did that, and we were able to achieve our goal of 10 to the 9 cells per square feet of the plastic. So if you have 10 feet of plastic, you would have 10 times 10 to the 9 cells. And if you have 100 feet of plastic, you would have 100 times 10 to the 9 cells. And our goal was to achieve that. We were able to achieve higher numbers than that. Now the real question was, okay, once we have sprayed the plastic in, or once we have sprayed the microbes in, or once we have dripped the microbes into the field, and the tilling process has begun, and once we have tilled the plastic into the field, and we have these uniform plastic pieces throughout the field, how do we sample, and how do we know the biodegradation, the weight loss over time happening in the field? And there's a method called the quartering method, which is published in the literature. And this method basically involves digging just a large, exact size piece of large hole, taking the entire soil out of that hole and putting it on a plastic tarp, on a wooden or on a wooden bench, and making a pancake out of this. And the reason you do all of this is you have this uniform piece of plastic in the field, these tiny pieces of plastic all over in the field. You take all of these with the soil, you put them in onto the top, and then you divide this into 4 quarters. two opposite quarters are rejected or put back into the field, and the two other quarters are kept such a way. And all of this is done so that the exact soil to plastic ratio is maintained. So if there is 10 grams of plastic and 100 grams of soil, by doing this, you don't change the amount of plastic in the soil, and you can still contain the amount of soil in a much smaller quantities. So you repeat this quartering process 4 times to reduce the quantity of soil and still have the same ratio of plastic in the soil. And once you have that, we had about 5 gallon buckets worth of soil with the plastic contained inside. We took it back to the university and we used something called wet sieving, where we used um, um, a mesh screen of a particular size, a mesh size 8, and we use a hose to remove the soil from the top, and any plastic pieces that were contained in the mesh were taken out. And you can see here how the plastic pieces are dispersed, and each of these has one replicate. And you can see some of these replicates have more plastic, some of these replicates have less plastic, which also led to a little bit of larger uncertainty, because typically because this is a time zero where none of the no biodegradation has happened. We just incorporated the mulch into the field. We should typically see most of these numbers close to each other, but because the process has such a large uncertainty, we can see the error bars are large, and that also is why we and again, as the author of the and the creator of the methods also have large uncertainty. But for our application, just to test the microbes, the uncertainty was a little bit larger, and we needed a more controlled setting to test these microbes in. So we decided we are proposing a raised bed method where we have three isolated raised beds. One of the raised beds, we drip the microbes in, so the entire soil contains the microbes. The second raised beds, we spray the microbes on the plastic films, and then we bury the plastic films in the raised beds. And that way the plastic films directly contain the microbes, have the microbes attached on the surface. And the third one is a baseline raised bed which does not have any microbes. So basically, we are trying to simulate what would happen in a field in a much more controlled and closed setting. And this would help us actually see whether a spray versus a drip irrigation method are both of them, and which one is better, if any, or the baseline is equal to all. So these are some of the methods which we are using to study this. And currently we have the raised bed set up, and we are in the process of running this experiment, hopefully by the end of September. I'll talk about the composting process. We are working with with an industrial composter locally called Impact Earth, who already accepts bioplastic in their compost directly, and they were kind enough to help us study the biodegradation of some of the mulch plastic films. And the process of setting up this experiment goes this way. So this is the mesh bags which I mentioned, and these mesh bags contain three replicate plastic pieces. These pieces are stuffed into this mesh bag. Once you stuff the plastic in, you put some amount of soil to sandwich the plastic pieces. So the plastic is kept between some amount of soil on each side, and then you close the mesh bags. Once we do that, we take these mesh bags to the composting site, and we put some amount of composting material, and we place the meshes equidistant from each other inside these isolated trays. These are about 5 gallon bins or trays. And once we stuff the compost inside such a way, we basically pile up these bins with the rest of the composting material on the top to kind of bury these completely inside these industrial composts. And once that is done, we retrieve the samples every 10 to 15 days. And these are some of the T0 samples. So this is how the samples look initially. And after 14 to 15 days, you can see how much more samples are broken down or fragmented. And I haven't shown in this yet, but the second time point, the T2, about 25 to 30 days, the fragmentation is even more. So the results seem extremely promising. The temperatures which we have seen in the compost is about 160 to 180 Fahrenheit. So we have seen as high as 70 to 80 Celsius in the compost initially, and very high relative humidity too. And very high fragmentation, as I mentioned, was observed in the second time point is looking even more promising, with 25 to 30 days of material breakdown. And with this, I'll come to a conclusion. I would like to thank the team, and I would also like to thank Cornell Cooperative Extension for all their help and support, Impact Earth for helping us out with the industrial composting experiments, and finally, I would like to thank all of the sponsors, Foundation for Food and Agriculture Research, who have funded these research. And we will take any questions you have now.
Right. Thank you, Harshal. And I want to say that Yarmila, Answer, and Elizabeth Buck are here in this call, and they are the experts in the agricultural side. We, the engineers, came into this a little naively, but we've learned a lot, and again, they are partners in this project, and so they might even help us with some of the questions. Yeah, let me hear if anybody has a question here, feedback, comments. Everything is welcome.
I have a question.
All right, and
First
give us a super quick intro and the question, please.
Yeah, I'm Kathleen Draper, been in the biochar world for about 12 years. Really happy to see this moving along. I think you guys have done a great job. I have a question for Harshal on the what are the testing parameters, assumptions, concerns around degradation of a biodegradable mulch film, with or without biochar? I mean, is it because it prevents yield, or is it leaching into nearby soils? What's the concern there?
Sorry, I was muted.
You want to take?
Go ahead.
You want to answer that?
Go ahead. You see?
No. I think it's a joint answer, because the problem with a lot of accumulation of the plastic in the soil is that it will stick a little bit and maybe intervene a little bit in the growth of the roots of the plants. The plastic at the long term is gonna biodegrade for sure, but if you're a grower that needs to grow every year, you're gonna put a mulch every year.
Mm-hmm.
So that will lead to a certain accumulation or a constant amount of plastic in the soil, and that is what literature is not sure about.
Yeah, and also to your point, many a times there is some amount of greenwashing in the industry, where some films which are called biodegradable may not be, and could be oxo-degradable films, which will leave a residue and which will build up over time in your soil. So if you keep using those, you will leave some amount of plastic back each time, and you will leave and when you work the field mechanically, you will tend to make these pieces smaller and smaller at a time. And over time, there are studies which have shown over long periods of time, 20 or 30 years, you will build so much plastic that the soil really gets affected by it. But with these types of biodegradable mulch films, they don't directly leave any residue. And so some films, like you mentioned, Ecovio is proven. The PB80, most grades of PB80 don't leave any residue behind. They completely biodegrade.
Yeah. Cool.
Thank you.
And then just one suggestion, possibly, if you are going to continue to test the degradation within a compost pile, it could be interesting, if there's bandwidth and funding and whatever, to have a compost pile that has 10 to 20% biochar, because it has been shown to heat it hotter and all that stuff. So
Agreed,
it would be,
yeah.
Harshal has worked on that, actually.
That
excellent.
Unfortunately isn't a part of this project, but it is absolutely something to keep in mind, where biochar does increase the biodegradation of the films.
And I want to ask if Elizabeth has something to add from her perspective of maybe drawbacks of people that has adopted biodegradable.
She just wrote something.
Oh,
I guess I can say it.
Yeah.
So she says, and agronomically, the new additions each year means that you always have a fresh and fairly fresh pool of plastics and bioplastics in the field. Those are unsightly. A portion can blow away and they can get tangled up in the roots.
And let me add a comment to that from a grower that we interview that has used a particular brand of biodegradable plastics now for 7 years. So he's seeing better and better performance year after year, and that can be because you're putting that food in the soil, and the microbes or that colony that degrades the film year after year is a little higher, the colony. So it improves the how this particular plastic in a particular field is doing. So that like both sides of the picture. It could be there could be an cumulative positive effect as well. But again, I like Harshil's point. You need to be careful that you're using biodegradable films and not oxo-degradable films, which might create another sort of problems, including microplastics. Thank you, Kathleen.
Hello, this is Yarmila Hazler from Cornell Extension of Monroe County, Cornell Extension agricultural educator here. I just wanted to add to Kathleen point. Sorry, Kathleen, if I can't pronounce it right. The longer conventional plastic stays in the soil, we know that it does affect the soil. The polyethylene, the plastic, the chemicals are toxic to the microbes and microbiome in the soil. So the faster rate of degradation is clearly beneficial and ideal. And I have a question for Harshal. Harshal, how deep in that compost pile are your samples?
It's about in the center, so we are about 4 to 4 feet from the bottom and about 5 feet from the top. So the piles are about 9 to 10 feet high, and we are right in the middle, which is what the sweet spot is. And that's what I talked to the people from Impact Earth about. And they were like, because they already accept bioplastics, and they found out the most amount of heat is trapped somewhere in the center, and that's where they recommended we should try test our samples out at. So that's what we are doing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and you're measuring the temperature on the top layer as well as the bottom.
So we are actually measuring the temperature right where inside the compost and inside these isolated bins which we have. So we are trying to make sure that the bins itself don't affect the compost in any way, because a lot of the composting process requires a movement of moisture through steam and also loss of moisture. So these bins which are sitting on top, which are sitting right in the middle, could affect. But so far we haven't seen any big issues with the bins right in the middle. But we have seen though that when each time we go and retrieve the samples, the temperature drops, and then it takes a week or 2 weeks for the pile to come back up to temperature, and that kind of affects the rate of degradation a little bit.
Interesting.
We got a question from also Elizabeth. She asks, did you get an opportunity to see how the degradation progresses when the film shifts position in the pile? The commercial compost is often turned 1 or 3 times. Harshal?
Yeah, so Elizabeth, what we have done is we are not taking any of the mesh bags and the material out of the bins. So every time we need to move the bins, we are taking the whole set of the bin out, and then we are moving it into a different pile. So what we are currently after is the temperature more than anything else, and actually see that the temperature is physically biodegrading the films or not, because we are seeing extreme fragmentation, which is good, but does it really translate to biodegradation, or does it just mean that the film is becoming smaller, but not really changing in its properties? It's still being that polymer, and that's what we are after currently, where we're like, oh, does initial composting really work with these kind of PBAT based films? Because a lot of the bioplastics which are accepted are starch based, which we know will degrade very quickly in the compost, but these kind of PBAT based films are the real question.
And we are developing just exactly to be able to measure those. Like after the plastics get to a smaller point, we're getting in to develop a method for detecting and measure and quantifying microplastics with of PBAT particularly, which are particularly hard to detect. And we're getting there using a GCMS, a gas chromatography mass spectroscopy methodology, to see the microplastics and quantify them and see how hopefully the compost will also biodegrade them. The microbial activity will lead them.
Yeah, and the hope with that experiment is even once you have your plastics in the field, and if you have mechanically worked the field enough, and you have put your plastics in years at a time, you can actually detect how much or quantity of plastics per year you have, and that also could be one thing where I think it's been done before, but this also can be useful in compost, where anyone who's accepting these kind of films, you can specifically look at, oh, is there microplastic coming out? If so, how much more do you need to compost, and make sure that you need to leave the pile on for a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks to not have that residue left behind or that microplastic left behind. Could be the could be another answer we could.
Back to your noisy data, the the spraying and the irrigation, the most effective was, from what I remember, I don't know if you can get back to that slide, Harshal. If I remember correctly, it was 7-day spray and drip.
Yeah.
So you're saying you can't trust the data, because I wonder if it would be worthwhile to repeat or kind of look in more details at this particular approach and see if it truly is one of the, if it truly is as effective as it looks like here on this, although noisy data, but nevertheless still a measure.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. So the plan is actually to retrieve some of the samples and check how much the biodegradation has happened, or how much of the film fragmentation has happened. Let me be more specific.
Yeah.
But with the microbes, we wanted to be extremely sure and isolate everything, because what happens with the field trials is once you spray the microbes in 3 or 4 days before, if you have heavy rains, you may lose the productivity or you may lose the microbes on the surface. If you have a really bright day, any microbes on top of the plastic film itself may be killed due to UV rays. And so these are some of the uncertainties which are very difficult to measure in the field. And the best way we thought about doing this is isolated raised beds, and a lot of the pre-prep can be done in the lab, and that way we can control the inputs and hopefully give a little bit more accurate outcomes. So the method is very valid. It's not the watering method is actually really valid, and probably is the best way to do this in the field currently. But specifically when we're testing out 2 different microbial methods, doing this in a semi lab and a semi field environment might be the best way to do this, if that makes any sense.
And there's an important piece behind the variability in the data. Harshal, you mentioned that this was done right after it was incorporated. And so the incorporation method was just it was disked twice. So discs basically work like pizza cutters, right? And so we took the tractor sized pizza cutter up the length of the bed, turned it around, and came right straight back. So what that does is those pizza cutters cut the film into fairly long strips. Anywhere between, I think the longest ones we were saying were maybe 16, 18 inches, some of them fractured in smaller pieces, and it incorporates those strips. So having done this without any time to start breaking down, the quartering method may have gotten more or less of those really long strips in it, just based on the way we were sampling. And so with time, that will become more uniform. And as that field got worked again this spring, we were careful to work the field so that we didn't disturb the plots left to right. They moved, we moved the soil around, but we made sure that all the soil was shifting forward a couple feet. We left a big gap of, 20, 30 feet between plots so that we'd be able to drag into the next plot forward. But as that soil mixes more, And as those plastic pieces begin to break down, we should see that variability decrease. A lot of that, I think, is just related to the timing and the incorporation method.
Agreed. And like you mentioned, the method specifically calls for a rototiller too, which we did not have as an equipment, which does a much better job of uniformly breaking the plastic apart, I think.
Slicing the plastic, yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm,
We have
mhm.
we have another question from Kathleen that she asks that if utilizing a lasagna mulch process that I think is also called cold composting, if I'm not wrong, at the end of the harvest would be worth considering. I think it's a way to, I don't know if Kathleen you wanna correct me, but what I've read about it is you cover on top after you harvest, you cover on top the mulch, so it gets more incorporated, like with the soil, it gets like really there, and then it would be the mixing and the incorporating of the soil, right? So that I don't know if I explained it right, but
Well, I'm sure the Cornell folks could do a much better job than I could on this. But I mean, what I've done with lasagna mulching, just backyard stuff, is, and since you were talking about looking at this from a composting perspective, I think it would be interesting maybe to do an experiment on one of your raised beds where you put your microbial stuff down and then you layer on different things, whether it's grass clippings or food waste or cardboard or whatever, just to see if that speeds it up. Or I mean, I was a little confused as to where you were going in the commercialization phase with testing this in a commercial composting system. It's not like you're gonna gather up the ag mulch at the end of the season and put it in that. So that's why I was trying to think, what would a practical method be of composting, and that's what came to me. I don't know.
Yeah. And I'll take this one to start. So I'm not sure what state you're in. New York State just passed a food waste law, and so it's requiring on a rolling basis incorporating more and more food waste streams to be composted, and that's really pushing a massive uptick in commercial compost operations. And for example, around Buffalo, we've already had one almost triple in size and had 3 others open up since this came into being, this law. So we have a lot of composting capacity, commercial composting capacity that could absorb films. And so that commercial process is really attractive. Growers right now are collecting all of their mulch, conventional non-biodegradable mulch. They collect it out of the field every year, and that goes to landfill. And so this is a process that they're already used to doing. It fits the sort of collect and deliver, or collect and have picked up, fits with practices and timing and equipment on farms far more than on-farm composting would. And so from just a pragmatic, it's great to adopt technology or to create technologies, but they need to be end applicable. I think that's what drove it towards the commercial facilities to start with.
Gotcha. Thanks.
All right. Any other questions?
Just a comment back again regarding the composting. So the food waste would represent a hot composting, I can just imagine. Given the, correct me if I'm wrong, but given the amount of moisture and the wetness, really, it has to be managed clearly, but it seems to me that would be probably more likely hot composting versus rather than cold composting. And so when Harshal was showing that one slide that the acceleration of commercially available biodegradable plastic mulch, I'm thinking that could be another side business, kind of, Harshal, to kind of grow those microbes and sell them to farmers who are already using biodegradable mulch that's conventionally commercially available. Just a thought. I'm always thinking about entrepreneurship.
That would be the hope, and that is why again, one thing which I did not mention during the presentation is the second reason to do the raised beds is to actually test the soil fairly frequently to see it does not affect any organic carbon content or any other nutrient content of the soil itself as compared to a baseline. Because adding extra microbes may mean they may break down more materials in the soil. And so that is the second piece of this puzzle where we don't want to affect the soil quality without affecting the soil quality. If it increases, biodegradation is the real key. And that's why maybe raised beds might be a better way to do this than really scaled up large scale test, where we don't really know what happens to the microbes. Do they if there is heavy rains, is there runoff? Are they really present because of the heat and whatnot? The raised bed might be the better way to go. So anyways, and I think any other questions for us?
Harshal, there are some Pseudomonas species that are plant pathogenic.
Absolutely.
What species? Yeah. So you did not specify the species. I would assume there are a lot of species.
Yeah. So
talk about
specific one which we isolated was Pseudomonas guarinconensis, and that is not plant pathogenic. And the second Achromobacter we isolated, one of them was a denitrificant species. So we immediately eliminated that because it could become a denitrifier in the winters when the conditions are right and it has nitrogen sources available. It could drain the soil of nitrogen. So we eliminated that. We only tested Pseudomonas in the field and also in the raised beds. That's what we're gonna do.
Awesome.
Harshal, there were originally fungi too, right?
Yes, we originally thought about testing food grade fungi, which have the right enzymes to break these kind of polyesters down. But we did not want to introduce a foreign species directly into the soil, especially food grade fungi, which can grow and drain the soil of nutrients. So we decided to go with the specific soil bacteria, which is isolated only from ag soils and which will get back into ag soils. So the hope is that once the plastic is degraded enough, these enhanced microbial communities would slowly die out and wind down to its natural state. And that is what and that is where again the isolated raised beds help, is you can do some of these tests which you cannot in the field in these kind of raised beds.
All right.
So one more comment before we wrap up. This is very exciting work. Multi-layer film and the use of these microbes to expedite degradation. I think it would be interesting if I would love to include a couple of slides if you can provide in my outreach program, so that growers in my area are aware what's being worked on and what is the future of biodegradable plastic mulch. So if you'd like to share maybe a couple of summary slides, I would be happy to incorporate them in my presentations to growers.
Absolutely, yeah, for sure.
Absolutely, yes, Suresh.
Thank you.
And where can I ask? Where are your growers?
Connecticut. I'm a vegetable extension specialist in Connecticut.
Oh, okay.
All right, let me give a shout out that we are looking for industry partners to scale up this technology. So let me give that shout out to this group. I do have some leads, but we're looking for in the next 6 months, maybe find a facility which we can manufacture some of these formulations now in industry equipment. So if you know something, send it my way and I'll follow up on those leads. Hopefully we get to test this with the state-of-the-art equipment and in the width that are more appropriate or comparable to the traditional mulch films. We're talking about 5 to 7 feet wide and then 1,000 feet long rolls of biodegradable film.
Mm-hmm.
And
Are you looking? Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, just a shout out if somebody knows something. And no, and again, I think the composting experiments, as you can see, the value of that is that we can get answers in 2 weeks rather than 180 days. That is the normal time frame to get one answer. So it's very, very slow. So to be able to screen and get some quick feedback is really integral to the process. We also acquired a piece of equipment recently as part of this project to test anaerobic biodegradation in the lab scale, but this piece of equipment particularly is a closed system, and we can monitor it remotely, and it can just generate data. So it's a very unique equipment, and we're going to be able to see CO2 evolution sort of in real time. So we're very excited about how that is going to bring some results. So we'll report on that in our future webinar or in the venues where we're disseminating all this information.
Yeah.
Let me
Go ahead, Professor.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, in fact, we can do the same at soil temperatures between 20 and 28 Celsius, and we can do it at industrial composting temperatures too. And which is the unique part of this, where we are able to test aerobic biodegradability at a much higher temperature and get us these kind of results much sooner than just testing it out at room temperature, which we currently do.
Yeah, I want to thank everybody for joining us today, and let me stop the recording.